Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from today. And welcome to this PM InFocus webinar support for the June 2025 exams. My name is Hazel McLucas and I'm an Education Partner Support Manager here at ACCA. Our session, Manage Your Approach, Master Your Exam Strategy, is designed to help you with the upcoming exam preparation. And today Z Can will join us to impart his PM knowledge. During the session, Z will showcase how to present exam answers effectively for higher marks using examples. He will also share his insights on common student challenges, important tips, and answers to questions frequently asked by students. And there will also be a live Q&A towards the end of the session. So as the title suggests, this session is an opportunity to learn the exam approach and design your strategy in a way that can maximise your preparation for the June 25 exams. So before I hand over to Z, I'd like to just cover a few housekeeping points quickly. You'll see at the bottom of your screen there are a number of buttons that you can use. There's a help icon which will provide resources and information to help you resolve any technical issues that you might experience. There's also icons for both the slides and the media player, and you'll need both of these during the webinar, so make sure you've got them selected now. You'll also see the attendee chat, which will allow you to engage with fellow webinar attendees. However, it is important that you do not share your personal information in there. And also there's a resource list, which is a file icon. If you click on this, you'll be able to access resources relevant to today's webinars, including some direct links. You can rearrange your screen to suit and resize the windows if you need to. And if at any point you can't hear what's been said or see the visuals, then please refresh your browser. Registering for today's webinar means that you'll be sent an email tomorrow with details on how you can listen to it again. So don't worry if you miss something or you have technical issues, you'll be able to access the recording. I am going to hand over to Z in a moment and I'll be back with you towards the end of the session. But if you'd like to ask Z or ACCA a question, then please post them in the Q&A section that you should see on your screen. Please note we can't guarantee responding to everyone directly, verbally, or in the web chat, but we do hope that the questions that we share today will be helpful to everyone on the webinar. So I'll hand over to you now, Z.
Thank you very much, Hazel. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all who are here joining me today on the InFocus webinar for PM pertaining to the way to manage your exam approach and also mastering your exam strategy for especially section C of the constructed response questions. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Zikang Chan, an expert tutor for PM and a few other subjects, and I have been teaching this subject for more than 20 years. Well, in this session, I would like to start off by highlighting to all what exactly are the ways that candidates should bear in mind to ensure to present your answer in exam effectively, and followed by I will highlight and bring up to your attentions regarding what are the key common challenges that faced by students. And more importantly, you would like to hear from me how are we dealing and overcoming these challenges with some strategies and approaches. Then I would like to share with all some of the frequently asked questions, which I believe these frequently asked questions could also be something that bother you in your previous study on PM. And after hearing my explanation and suggestions on this FAQ, I would like to take on to some of the live questions, and I will be appreciated if you would leave your questions in the Q&A, and we will try to answer as many as we can within the time allowed over here in this session. So that will be the live Q&A sessions that coming to the end of this part of the webinar. So without further delay, how exactly that we will ensure the exam answers that we presented, especially on section C, the constructed response questions, are of effective. Now, as we all know, there are two 20 marks questions that you would require to attempt in every sitting of PM. To me, a good way to ensure an effective presentation of answer is starting from right at the left of the red box in this arrow sign. It is starting with a good and correct understanding on the task assigned to the students in the questions. Just imagine it is something that bosses of an organization is asking you to perform and complete certain tasks. To ensure the tasks that you deliver meet the expectations of the bosses and employer, you have to really understand and listen carefully what the bosses is expecting from us. So same thing applied to exam questions in section C. Please identify the tasks, starting with looking at the verb attached to the requirement. Now, to me, identifying the verb and the task is not a key challenge, but to understand, to differentiate different types of verbs that found in the task is of challenging. An example would be if the questions asked to narrate on something with the verbs such as discussed, explained. In an unlikely event, if the question asks evaluate or recommend. So what are we supposed to do? What differences do we have? These are the kind of suggestions that I would like to share with you as we go through an exam questions in a moment. Now, once we have understand the meaning of the verb, whether it is narration or computational, it is time for us to relate the storyline, the information that found in the scenario into each of the requirements pertaining to each of the tasks. So these perhaps require the student to read through the entire scenario of the questions carefully. But again, to me, reading through the questions is not the key and the real challenge, but to analyze, to think a little bit deeper. Why would examining team tell us about the nature of the business? What's the meaning? What's the implication if the questions indicate some issues, some weaknesses, some incidents that took place in the organization? Why is there a need for the examining team letting me know this information? Guys, remember, an exam questions will never provide information for no reason. Every clue given in each of the paragraphs will serve for certain purpose, particularly relating and addressing some of the tasks that found in each of the requirements. So therefore, the deeper you could think through the storyline in the scenario, the quicker allow you to see the connection between the information found in the questions into the respective tasks that found in the requirement. The quicker that you can connect these things together, the sooner you will be able to craft your answer plan in your mind. That is the part which many students are facing challenges. And I would like to give you some advice and tips in a moment. Well, the third stage, just before we come up with a physical answer, you need to make sure from the understanding of the task and the scenario, as mentioned, it is crucial that students need to find a way to connect, join them up. The process of these would form your answer planning in your mind. So that will allow you to be able to visualize how exactly will your answer looks like in both the computational or narrative questions type. Finally, to put everything from your mind into your spreadsheet or the word processor response will be the one that finally dictate the quality of the answer and the marks that you would have earned based upon the presentation of your answer, and hopefully in a professional manner. Let's take a look at some of the good habits, do's and don'ts in dealing with narrative questions type on section C. Looking at the first three bullet points at the top, these are the best practiced good habit for students to consider closely, adopting these habits whenever it comes to dealing with narrative questions. First, ensuring every single point or finding that you are about to articulate, try to come up with a signpost or heading to draw the marker attention this is what you are about to articulate. Once we have the signpost and heading, it then followed by a full articulation to fully develop what that you would like to address according to the verbs that mentioned. This is where I would like to take on some of the questions that we have always received from every session of the webinar. Some would say, how are we supposed to know? What are we supposed to write? How far do we have to write? If the question asks us to discuss a subject matter or explain a subject matter. Now, before I would tell you some of the advices over here, after this webinar, I would strongly advise everyone, go back to the ACCA website, going into the PM. With the list of the resources, click into exam technique. In that part of the content, you will have ranges of documents. It is not to say article, but it's document, where it is coming from examining team. One of the document, it's about managed the constructed response questions approach of PM. In that document, you could see what examining team would suggest you, what exactly are the way that you're supposed to write. If the verb start with discuss something, and then followed by explain something. In general, when the questions is asking with the verb explain something, you would just need to further articulate to talk about the subject matter. What is it all about? Now, of course, all these things depending on the entire sentence that form the task completely. But in general, explaining simply means telling people what is it all about. Whereas, if the question is using the word discuss on something, you would expect to go a little deeper by sharing your thoughts, your insight upon talking about what is the subject matter all about. So you have to go on and think about, after explaining what is the subject matter, what next? What do you think about this subject matter? How would these things be beneficial? How would these things be contributing to improve the performance of the organization? Well, I hope with this simple illustration that already show you some simple idea how to differentiate with the verbs that found. Going back to the documents, guys, you will see more guidance from the examining team apart from discuss and explaining. There are many other kind of verbs that you would see in different requirements. Well, do not forget, once you have articulated a point of finding completely, leave a paragraph before you come and start talking about another point of finding. So in other words, try to avoid the following bad habits. Number one, try not to use jargons. Now, there's no point to impress the marketing team by using a lot of languages that is trying to portray and reflect a high standard of writing. ACCA exam is not about the test of English. So using too many jargons doesn't help and add value in your answer quality. Secondly, try not to waffle without any substance and real content of it. Remember, quantity of the answer, length of the answer is nothing to do with the quality of the answer. In fact, answer with high marks tends to look shorter than answers that come with lower marks because quality is of substance comparing to quantity. Now, as opposed to waffling, another extreme type of answering habit that everyone should try to avoid at all times is trying to put in the answer in nearly a point form format. If you were to put an answer with just a single line long of the point form answer, ask yourself, have you really addressed the task with the verb like discuss, explain, or recommend? Have you really answered the kind of verb correctly? I'm afraid not, obviously. When the questions is coming with the word discuss or explain, you're going to tell the marketing team a bit more than just a single sentence. Hence, it is always recommended an answer that will assure you to get 1 mark would usually look like a paragraph that come with about 2 to 3 sentences long of a paragraph. So strike a balance in between the two. Waffling, point form answer, is not a good way of presenting a narrative question, but it is the point for the paragraph answer with signpost and heading would be something you would like to consider. Let's take a look at some good habits in dealing with numerical or computational questions time. It is very common. Questions with this kind of task would come with the verbs such as calculate and estimate. When you would like to deal with this kind of computational type of task, you will always notice in PM, there are certain kind of tasks that are kind of straightforward to derive the figure. So I classify this kind of task as a simple calculation. A good example would be, let's determine the value of revenue. So you would just have to take the selling prices multiplied by the sales volume. So with this kind of a simple calculation, do not spend too much of time in over-narrating the step of the working, as long as the markers understand, well aware. What is this item all about? Where are the figures coming from in your working? That will be good enough. So therefore, for simple calculation, you may just want to make use of one step of the calculation with the correct usage of functionality in the spreadsheet. That will be good enough. But let's not forget, if you would like to tell the marketing team, well, the way I derive the revenue is based on the selling price multiplied the sales volume, maybe it would be good when you just narrate with dollar per unit multiplied number of units after the item called revenue. Then when you go to the cell where you are about to put in the working using the functionality to derive the value, at least the marketing team know what is the first figure refers to, what is the second figure to refers to, when the products of these two come together, derive to the revenue. So that would be good enough for simple calculation. However, for calculations that is rather complex, whereby it involves several steps and stages to derive the value. Take for example, when you are about to derive labor costs that involving learning curve, I don't think it is a good idea to put every scientific calculations together with the rest of the calculation in just one row of the formula tab to work out the labor hours or the labor costs. That will make the markers difficult to follow what exactly each and every of the figure that you're trying to present. So for this kind of complex calculation, you may want to show the step. So first and foremost, you may want to show what exactly is the cumulative average hours per unit, for instance. Then you will indicate the formula you're using, y equals to ax to the power of b. So then only you place the figure into the cell with the functionality to derive the figure, followed by with the cumulative average hours per unit. It all depends what the question is asking for, whether they are asking for cumulative hours or the time spent on the specific unit. You show your step with a clear narration so that the marketing team will be able to follow what are you up to. Guys, that's another reason and purpose for you showing the step in that detailed manner. One, when you have spare time before you click finish to end the exam, what if you would like to come back and do cross-checking? When you leave the audit trail, don't you think it will be a lot quicker for you to do double-checking? Secondly, should something went wrong along the step of the working and the marker spotted it, however, you managed to carry on the rest of the step correctly. Guys, that is the point where you manage to take advantage on one of the marking rules called own figure rules, that all the markers were well aware how to grade the marks for the student's answer. As long as you show a clear step of working, should any errors were made along the line, if you manage to walk through the rest of the calculations correctly, you will still get the rest of the mark, except you will lose certain marks at the point where errors were committed. So these are all the good habits, allowing you to scope up some of the marks that you deserve while you minimize the mark that you are losing out. These are the good habits that allow you to secure as many marks as you should have obtained and earned. And in an unlikely situations whereby if the questions is asking for some forecasting related matters or some of the calculations pertaining the uses of estimated figure, and if the questions did not provide a clear instruction or the clear basis of understanding what exactly the forecast or the estimate made of, you may want to put down your assumption, letting the marketing team know what's up in your mind. Again, as I say, these, however, is appearing in an unlikely situation where there are certain room of debate in some of the exam questions, which again, it is highly unlikely to be found at this stage of exam. Well, guys, please remember, do not derive the answer without showing the correct functionality. However, some of us will start asking these questions, which I will show you in one of the questions shortly. It is not all the time that the requirement in section C that require calculation that will come with a spreadsheet. It is possible that a requirement that is asking for calculation, but the response option is words, no spreadsheet. So what are we supposed to do? So guys, that is some of the advice I would like to share with you in a moment. But whatever it is, at the end, do not make your answer totally unknown and unclear. As a result, do not unlabel your answer. Every amount that you show, at least label, telling the marketing team what exactly this is. Is this figure representing average hour? If yes, indicate the word average hour, and the figure will come with the wording at the back, X number of hours, X number of kilo, X amount of dollar. So this kind of signage is something that will be good enough to let the marketing team know and understand what are you up to in your answer. Now guys, it's time for me to show you some of the simple demonstrations on how exactly that a poor layout of answer presentation are found in some of the script of the students, as opposed to some of the good presentation of answer for one of these constructed response questions that found in the recent exam. Well, as mentioned on the arrow sign of the diagram a moment ago, the first thing that we have to do to ensure we have a good and effective presentation of answer is always to understand clearly the task assigned to us. So as you can see in part A, the task is always coming alongside with the verb. So in this case, pick up the verb such as calculate and comment. Guys, in this examination, PM, you may aware that it is quite common every requirement may be possible to come with multiple tasks. Hence, you may want to keep an eye on this kind of add-on words, which I call AND, A-N-D. Do not underestimate this kind of habit. The moment students omit and neglect the word AND, it is likely that you may have overlooked and not respond to the second task after AND. So that already allows you to earn only first half of the mark at most. You are already at a disadvantage, obviously. So in this case, I know clearly we have quite a number of figures to calculate: receivable collection period, operating profit margin, current ratio. So these are the three numbers that I will have to show in my response option a moment later. Then it tells me I have to work out these three numbers for both. Now, I have no idea what is URI, I have no idea what is LUC stands for, but at least in my mind, I know there are 6 sets of figures I need to produce. So when I read my requirement, I immediately got to imagine and try to materialize how many numbers should I be showing as my answer. Then at the end, I see another verbs coming up. Comment on the relative performance. So this question is clearly a performance measurement questions, which I believe this is definitely one of the worrying area that many students are facing, particularly not so much on the calculation. It is more towards what exactly that we're supposed to write an impressive answer when it comes to asked students to comment on the performance. Many students have very limited idea what are we supposed to do, what are we supposed to write when the question is asking on commenting on their relative performance. Now, before I give you an idea, think about the 7 marks. How do you think the allocations of marks will be in between the calculation and the comment? Most likely, it will be somewhere in between a split of 3 and 4. But which one is 3? Which one is 4? I think most of us will know the answer. My guessing would be out of 7, perhaps maximum you will get 3 marks on the calculation because there are 3 items that require to be shown. However, more than half the marks are likely to relate to your commentary on the relative performances. Now, many of us, when you see the word comment on the performance, we tend to just, okay, I just go to speak out what the figures say. If the figure is high, I just go to narrate in wording and say the figure looks good. If the figure is small, then I will just have to say the figure looks bad. Guys, that is not comment, number 1. Number 2, how many of us notice when the question is saying comment on their relative performance? Have you managed to caught the words relative? What exactly the word relative performance got to do in dictating the way that your answer should look like? Relative, in other words, is comparative. So what does it mean in simple? When you are asked to comment the performance, make sure you must have some kind of comparison between something against something. That is the way it crafts the content of your answer. If students do not realize the importance of this kind of wording, they will just comment the performance in isolation. Again, did you really answer the questions as what is being asked? I'm afraid not. So these would directly affect the marks that you would have earned. Now, apart from A, by the way, if you play back the video and watch the video after this session, take a look at the storyline on the left-hand side later, after going through all the requirements. Then I will highlight to you what you have to pick up on the storyline. But again, with the time constraint, I would like to focus on picking up the wording in the requirement instead of going through the whole of the storyline in the scenario. Now take a look at the second requirement on part B. As usual, you will notice part B1 and B2 come with this kind of verb. There are 2 verbs in B1. First, you are asked to calculate, followed by you are asked to state on something. And then part B2 is asking on the explanation required, as I have mentioned a moment ago, what exactly you have to do. Followed by looking at an add-on words. And I see the word and in part B1. So clearly in B1, there will be further calculations needed. And this time we are asked to calculate a KPI on return on investment. And this time the ROI required is for both the results, URI and LUX. So immediately in my mind, I have 2 numbers to be shown. Followed by, let's not forget to state which manager, if any, would entitle to receive a bonus. Read the words carefully, guys. The questions wanted you to just write down. Is there any manager? It could be none, or it could be both, or it could be one of it who deserve to receive a bonus. Did the question ask you to calculate the amount of the bonus? Not really. If students take an extra step and go calculate the amount of bonus, you have no marks because that is not being asked. So remember, one of the ways to optimize the time that you spend is just answer right to what is being asked. Do not answer more than what is supposed to be answered, and do not just let go any tasks that were found in the requirement. Now, same thing applies for part B2. You are asked to explain. What is there to explain? The problems. Guys, keep an eye on the words, problems. How many problems do you have to provide? I would say at least 2. But if you explain 2 problems, do you think you can get a pass where the marks in B2 were 6 in total. We always say it as a tutor, to ensure you secure a passing mark in the exam, for section C, make sure when you craft your answer plan must allow you to secure at least half the mark. For narrative questions type, how do you assure you can secure a passing mark? And the answer is on the very basic way of counting. When you come up with a signpost, a heading, then it comes with a paragraph of articulation. This structure of answer should give you a mark. Unless with the same signpost, beside the first paragraph, you take on the same signpost to go on deeper with the second paragraph of discussion. Take, for example, a demonstration of how these explanations are being applied to this scenario, or how would these explanation reflected on the calculation. Then you may earn another additional mark. But by default, every 1 point of finding coming with 1 paragraph, that will give you about a mark. So therefore, if you would like to secure a passing mark of 3 out of 6, you're going to think about 3 problems to discuss in B2. So it would be good if you go through the storyline later, pick up from the scenario, identify the 3 signposts, then only you start articulating. Do not come with 1 signpost followed by articulation, then another signpost. If you go in that approach, it is easy and likely that your time management will go bust. Try to secure your framework of idea by coming up with the 3 signposts followed by articulation on each of the paragraphs. In that way, you will be able to manage your time much more effectively. Finally, looking at part C, another calculations that need to be done and followed by explanation. So guys, do you notice that most of the requirements in these questions come with a multiple tasks? And not only that, some of the tasks are narrative in nature, some of the tasks are numerical in nature. However, do you notice that the response options are mainly in word processor? So how are we supposed to demonstrate computational type of tasks? Well, we know there's no problem to deal with narration, but how about computational or numerical tasks? Let's take a look at some of the suggestions on the demonstration, whereby some students may thought for A, take for instance, let's go back to A of the requirement that is asked to derive the 3 ratios for both the result. Some students, they will just write down the answer, such as what you see on the screen. For URI, here is the receivable collection period, X number of days. Most likely, how do you derive the figure? You are likely to make use of your manual calculator that you will bring along to your computer lab. I would suggest strongly make use of the manual scientific calculator that you bring along to the computer lab. Try not to use the on-screen calculator. That is relatively slow and time-consuming if you were to ask me personally. Hence, many students will just punch the calculator, work out the figure, key in the figure to this response option. And then at the end, take a look at the last paragraph. What exactly the students would do to comment on the performances. Do you think the following comment add value? Do you think the following comment is beneficial for the management of these resorts to understand what is happening? The answer is, I'm afraid not. Because my last paragraph is purely just repeating to tell the marketing team what is the figure looks like, which one goes higher, which one goes lower. Guys, this is not commentary. Commentary is supposed to be when the number looks higher comparing to some other, you may want to tell me the story behind. What could be the story behind to explain such a differences? Now, of course, if the marks are much higher, you have to go a step deeper. You may want to tell me what's the implication. Of course, in PM, that would be good enough if you can tell what exactly make up the number. What is a storyline? What is a story background that explains these figures to be true? So let's take a look at how I present the answer, comparing to this one that is not really an impressive way to impress the marketing team. Here we go. First and foremost, should you come across this kind of the questions in the upcoming exam, you got to do some calculation. However, you only have got the words processor, presentation, or response option. What I would suggest everyone to do, make use of the one I circled in the red box, the table function. Make full use of these table functions, everyone. That will allow you to structure your working in a more systematic manner in this way. Do you see that? The way I present the working is so much different and so much more market-friendly comparing to the one that you saw a moment ago. So I will first think about how do I want to make use of these matrices to insert all these numbers. So try to make full use of this kind of table approach. And then, do you see that? Apart from just punching my calculator, I show the marketing team the formulas. Then I even show the marketing team the workings. Now, I would like to address to everyone, for the sake of time in exam, if you look at the last two columns, URI and Lux, you will ask me, TK, is it okay if I only write the working for the first column? For Lux, I will just put in 61 days without showing the step of the working. I will tell you, fantastic, that is perfectly fine. As long as the marketing team understand where do you get the figure from, with the formula, with the demonstrations for URI, that is a good answer. That is a good communication to the marketing team to earn the marks. Now, of course, let's not forget, once you have done the presentation on the calculation, how about the commentary part? How about the narration part of it? Well, let's take a look at the way I put it down in a more market-friendly manner. The receivable collections periods, take a look at this. I would look at the number that we derive, and I will start thinking through what exactly is the story behind. Do you see the first line? I start using the word compare, as compared to. So I'm making a comparisons between URI and Lux, and not to forget, the questions is also coming with industry average. I'm putting all these things together, and how do I form my idea in each of these paragraphs? I fully refers back to the clue, the information that found in the storyline of the scenario. Guys, I would like to remind you, in PM, when questions is asking on performance measurement related matters, despite the fact all the storyline are served to be the clue for you to form your finding and commentary. However, there is always a possibility, and the possibility is very high, that the clues given in the scenario may not be completely clear. They bound to have some gap, missing gap, that you got to fix up the gap by using your business sense, by using, I will not use the word common sense, but it's business sense to join things up. So when you are allowed to fill up the gap with your business sense, that will tell you you are allowed to write up your commentary with the reason that is not exactly the same with the model answer. As long as you can let the marketing team know, how do I use my business sense to connect the clue, the storyline, and the numbers together? As long as you can join them up with a good business sense, your explanations will take marks. So if you look at the way I narrate on the commentary for the performance, comparing to the model answer, I am very, very confident. This is the kind of answer that will be acceptable by the marketing team, despite the fact my point of finding could be not exactly the same as the model. So that is the kind of sense, that is the kind of confidence you need to have. Again, make sure you need to narrate your answer with a clearly communicated, with a clearly explained finding, with showing good business sense. Guys, apart from looking at A, let me just show you a very simple and rough explanation and demonstration. How are we to demonstrate the presentations for B? Looking at B again, we are asked to calculate ROI for B1. So what did I do? I'm using the same tactic. I'm using the table to put in and present my working with formula, with the workings and the answer. I will show the marketing team, do I get the bonus for the manager? I will indicate yes or no. That would be my presentation of answer. For part B, I know I have to show at least more than one problems relating to the current bonus system. So I will therefore come with a signpost followed by my narration and articulations of the finding in each of the signposts. Well, I hope after seeing some of these demonstrations that will give you a better idea and a clearer idea the way to ensure your presentation of answer in section C is of better quality. Guys, here comes some of the key challenges that students are facing and dealing with. Take a look at the 6th element of it. Ask yourself, do you also face the similar challenges? And do you notice what's the meaning of this diagram in the center? It tells us all these challenges are not independent. In fact, they are interrelated. Do you agree with me? It is unlikely that you can get one fixed without touching on the rest. When you would like to fix up all these challenges, in other words, you're going to fix up all at one go. So how are we going to fix up all these challenges all at one go? I would like to show you one of the mind map, which identify to fix up the challenges. There are 4 quadrants of the root cost that you got to make some changes. Which are the 4 quadrants of the root cost that lead to all these challenges? Mindset, routines, habits, knowledge, technique, and strategy. Guys, I will show you in a moment what are the do's, what are the don'ts on these 4 quadrants of the root cost. Get it fixed. Naturally, you will see improvements in your marks. Let's take a look at the following. By looking at the middle column in the gray color, these are the bad practices that if you happen to have any of these bad practices, please drop it. Replace by the one on the right-hand side. Spend some time, read through all this key point on the right-hand side. What do I mean by that? Now, one of these items I would like to draw your attention is the knowledge acquisition. Now, we know in order to do well in PM, you got to have a robust technical knowledge. And from there, you have to learn out the subject matter well. So now the question is the learning method. Many students tend to have no idea what is the good learning method rather than just rote learn, memorizing stuff, particularly formula. We're going to swallow, we're going to memorize lots and lots of formulas. Guys, the more that you adopt this kind of rote learning and memorizing stuff, the more you will feel pressure and frustrated in preparing the exam for PM. Rather, try to learn with logical mindset and thinking, because every model, every technique, especially every formula that you see in PM, I'm telling you, everything in PM can be explained by logic. With a logical understanding, you will be able to grab hold of the idea, the rationale behind every single model and calculation. This is the kind of effective way of learning to master your PM, to bring a strong foundation for you to embark onto the advanced level of the subject later. So therefore, with this kind of advices, I would like to take you through to a few. In total, there are 5 FAQs that many students tend to ask before I open the floor to the live Q&A. Now, have you got this kind of questions in your mind? For section C, could we use wording like, let's assume a figure that we're not too sure, or we may have totally forgotten the formula, but in order for us to get the mark on the subsequent one, can we assume this item to be a fictitious value, and then we carry on to, let's say, commenting the performances? Yes or no? The answer is yes. This is a smart way of making full use of own figure rules. That's how you take fullest advantage of own figure rules. Should you get stuck in one of the calculations or you have no time to complete the calculation, you are allowed to make an assumption on this item to be a value, and then you carry on to the commentary. As long as the commentary is based on this fictitious value, the rest of the mark is still there, except you don't get the mark on the calculations bit. So that is my answer for FAQ 1. Now let's take a look at the second questions over here. How many points do we have to develop on the theory or narrative questions? Say 16 marks for the theoretical analysis. Now, I would first have to highlight the point to all. It is unlikely you will get a standalone requirement that comes with such a heavy marks. You saw this yourself a moment ago, okay? But I'm taking this originally from a student's. Actually, instead of 16 marks, there will be more likely if the mark is capped at 10 to 12 marks for a standalone theoretical analysis questions. Well, the answer for this, it's again, number one, you always have to set yourself a target on the passing mark. Supposing this is 16, what's the passing mark? 8. To earn the 8 marks, how many signposts, how many paragraphs that you have to provide? As we say, 8. So that is the kind of answering skills that you need to have and the planning skill you should apply during the examination. If you ask, should we go for 16 paragraphs? Ideally, you should, ideally. But is it practical? Is it doable? If it is a bit too unrealistic, if it is a little bit overly ambitious to do this, can we do something that is within our reach and yet we are still able to achieve our passing? That is what we're trying to say. So always take half mark as the main target. And then always remember, when it comes to narrative questions, one signpost, one paragraph with a key point, that should allow you to earn a mark, provided that paragraph carry a key substance pertaining to the heading. Now, let's take a look at the third FAQ. Could you explain the difference between the verbs such as discuss, explain, and evaluate? Well, again, I will not want to spend too much of time in narrating over here because I have mentioned already a moment ago, more importantly, everyone should spend time to read the document. As I mentioned a moment ago, you will have a clear understanding about the distinctions on these verbs that are found in the requirements. Let's take a look at the fourth FAQ. My biggest issue is to memorize all the formulas, such as variances, which, don't you agree, guys? There are many formulas on variances that we have to just remember. And the worst part is all these formulas all look alike. They all look so similar. Now, I understand a lot of us tends to adopt a learning method of variances through memorizing the formulas. And we tend to memorize every single formula in isolation. Guys, spend some time, think through that. Go back to the basic, what variances is all about. Variances is all about comparing between what you plan to achieve and what you have achieved. The differences, obviously, is the variances. So based upon this idea, don't you think there is no need to memorize all the formula in isolation? In fact, the formation of all the variances are coming from the same root cause. As long as you master the same root cause, I'm telling you, you just got to learn one set of formula. And the same set of formula could be applied to all variances calculation. If you want to know, what do I mean by that? After this session, please go to the PM website of accglobal.com under technical articles, where there is one topic explainer video by the name variance analysis. Please take a look at how I present, how I explain the formation of the formula of variances in that video. And here's the clue for all. That framework that you will see in that video will become the standard framework I use to apply to all other variance calculation. I suppose that is a tips and that is a clue for you to discover the secret behind the scene. So please go back, watch that topic explained in the video by the title Variance Analysis. Well, here comes the last FAQ before I take on the live questions. Now, sometimes I can't really relate the situations of the questions to the requirement. I really have no idea what to write. So what are the tips and advices that you could give to us? Remember how I talk about how I narrate the way that we deal with the narrative questions, where the questions is asking you to comment the performances? I say, first understand the verb. Now, one of the reasons the students couldn't fix up this particular issue is that maybe the students still do not really understand what the verbs are all about. So get it fixed. Second, when you read the scenario, you always ask yourself, there is always a reason behind that examining team tell us about this scenario. As long as you apply some business sense, take for instance, the questions you saw a moment ago, that was a hotel business. Then you're going to ask yourself, have you spent time for vacation by staying at a hotel before? If yes, can you apply your own experience in staying in the hotel to try and understand how the hotel operator is running the business? This kind of business sense do not require any working experience. It is from the real life experiences. You bring in your business sense into the scenario. It allows you to connect the hint, the scenarios, and the requirement better by filling up the gap. So take a look at the way I narrate the commentary when you play back the video. You will understand what I'm talking about. So that is how we deal with the challenges that face in this FAQ. So guys, I would like to spend the last 5 minutes to take on some of the questions that we see in the Q&A boxes over here. The first questions I have gotten here is that what is the way that we should use in dealing with a building block questions? I suppose this kind of questions is not only confined to building block. It could also apply to balance scorecard. It could also apply to value for money. Am I right to say so? So whenever the questions is asking, comment the performances that based upon the KPI developed within the framework of the model. Guys, no matter which model that we mention, building block, balance scorecard, or value for money, here are the tips and the clues. Do not just comment the performance of the KPI by just merely talking about whether the figure has gone up, whether the figure has come down. Always try to use the wording like because of, the figure has increased because of, the figure has come down due to. However, you may not be guaranteed that reasoning is what exactly that caused the figure to be changing, because very likely there are certain gaps, as I mentioned, that you're going to fill up based on the background of the scenario, based on the answer. You're going to fill up with some of the gap based upon your business sense. So in order to let the marketing team know that is my business sense, which could be different from the model answer. When you use the word because, when you use the word due to, try to add on the word maybe or probably. So if you take a look at the answer I shown a moment ago, you will see this kind of word, maybe due to, probably because of, possibly explained by. These would have given you a cushion to let the marketing team know. That is based on my observation and guessing. So that is the key words that you use in dealing with commenting the performance based on the model. The last reminder for the model in use would be trying to appreciate the interrelationship of the performance on different aspects. If you look at building block, for instance, when you are asked to comment the performance on the 5 dimensions, you should aware that out of the 5 dimensions, 3 of it are called determinants: quality of service, flexibility and innovation, and resource utilization. These are the determinants that will reflect onto the result or the outcome dimension. So try to interrelate. Well, the result that you see in the financial KPI, the result you see in the market competitiveness could reflect the effectiveness on the customer satisfaction that we manage to serve. It could reflect into how good is our flexibility and innovations on the services provided. Try to show the interrelationship. That will make your answer very much integrated. Same thing applies for balanced scorecard and value for money. Okay, now I would like to take on two more questions over here before I hand over to Hazel. Now, when calculating increase and decrease in the analysis questions, do we calculate the differences in percentage point or in figure? If you ask me, as long as you do not make any comparison, you just want to comment on that indicator alone, it is fine to either present the figure in relative, in other words, percentage, or absolute form. However, what do you think? Most of the time, performance measurement require comparison. When it comes to comparison, you need to ensure the numbers are comparable in nature. One of the ways to ensure this number is comparable in nature, regardless of size, is to make sure the indicator are measured and expressed in relative form. So unless and until the question specifically require which form of indicator you have to show. Otherwise, I think everyone should know the answer by nature already. The answer is relative form of expression is always the preferred one. It will be more secure, more flexible for making any kind of comparison, regardless of the background. Okay, well, some of us asked about to answer the questions with 5 to 6 marker questions, is there any specific amount of point that we have to be given, as I've mentioned a moment ago? If the questions come with 6 marks, how many marks do you want to get a pass? 3. So how many paragraphs, how many points? 3, obviously. So that would be the answer, okay? Maybe I want to take on the last questions over here. For questions involving simulation or expected value, is it better to manually explain the step or use the built-in spreadsheet like summation of the product? It, again, depending on the task that required by the questions. If I suppose you're asking me on the calculation, when you are showing a complex calculation as mentioned a moment ago, let's say, for example, you want to show expected value calculation, okay? It would be good that you write down the formula, write down in wording of the formula, and then I'm sure in the calculation of expected value, you will need to calculate the weighted average based on the value of each outcome. Do not cram everything into one single row, but at least break it down. What are the value for each of the outcome together with the respective probability? Then you could use the summation of the product. You can do that. Of course, other than using the functionality, you want to do it manually, that is perfectly fine. But again, the bottom line is the clarity of your working. Make sure markers know what you are up to. Okay? So that is all the time that we have today. And I think I have answered most of the key issues and worries that most of us are having. So I would like to pass the floor back to Hazel by now. Hazel, over to you.
Thank you very much, C. And after all the questions that you've been able to ask him, I'd now like to ask you a question. So I have put a quick poll on screen, and hopefully you'll find this a really easy question to answer. So do you know what dates the pre-June 2025 mock exams and debrief videos are available for you? So if you can select your answer for on screen from the options on screen. So is it the 9th of May? Is it the 11th and 16th of May? Is it the 9th and 16th of May? Or are you just not sure when those resources are available? That's great. I can see some answers coming in. So let's see, what do you think? Is it A, B, C, or D? Oh, I can see lots of emojis coming up, so I'm hoping that everyone is indicating that they're finding this a really easy question to answer and they already know the answer. You can see lots of thumbs up. So I'll just give you one more minute before we have a look at the results, and I'll let you know if you were right with the answer. So last chance to pick from the 4. If you're not sure, even just take a guess. Okay, let's see. So you can see the results on screen, and the correct answer is the 9th of May and the 16th of May. So 31% of you got that right, which is great. I can see that there's quite a few people that didn't know, but the great thing is now you do, because you've been on this webinar and you know the answer. So the mock exams are already available. They were released last week, and the debrief videos will be released tomorrow. So this is perfect timing for you to schedule it into your revision. And you'll find a link to these resources on your screen to find out how to access them. They really help focus your studies and give you an important snapshot of your knowledge, and it can also help you overcome exam day nerves if you complete that mock, so they're really important. So just a final word before we go on ensuring that you equip yourself with the best resources on your lead up to the exam. So you'll also find links in the resources on screen to our CBE practice platform, the ACCA Study Resources YouTube channel, and the ACCA Study Hub. And these 3 platforms are key and have a wealth of resources you can include in your revision. So they include the mock and debrief videos I just mentioned. Also, we've got practice tests, we've got topic explainer videos that Z mentioned. We've also got quizzes and practice questions. So before you leave today's webinar, make sure that you save these links and you can use them going forward preparing for your exam. So with this, I will need to bring this to a close, and I really hope that you found today's session useful. As I mentioned at the start, as you've registered for the webinar, you will receive an email tomorrow with details on how you can listen to it again. Thank you, Z, for extending his support today, and also to the team in the back end who've helped deliver the session successfully. And finally, thank you to everyone who's joined us today, and we wish you all the best for your exams. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.